I've got a submission here from Arakan, who is flying Betaflight 241 on a 180 size copter with PIDs close to default. And when I first read that, I thought, dude, come on, make an attempt to tune it before you hand it to me for advice. But then I realized that the default PIDs on Betaflight fly so good for so many copters that I don't really blame you for flashing it, taking it out to start tuning it, and going, I don't know what to do next. So yeah, it's damn you, Boris, or whatever. Thank you, Boris. Let's take a look at your log. First thing I do is I check the gyros, zoom all the way out to 10%, and the lines are relatively thin. The yaw gyro is a little bit thicker and noisier, and that's pretty normal, and it's not a problem in and of itself. But they're definitely thin enough that nothing here jumps out as a problem. Okay, with that being said, let's go look at your PIDs. We'll start with roll, like I usually do. And let's just scroll through it here. Overall, the P term does not look excessively active. I don't see the magnitude of the P term is not very large. I don't see signs of oscillation. I like the way it looks here in terms of how active it is. It could be more active, but I don't think this copter is flying bad. Here you go into a roll, and we see a lot of oscillation here, right? And I've said in the past that the ideal for me for a roll or a flip would be to have the P term close to the axis during the middle of the roll. And I feel like that I'm backing away from that some, especially on recent versions of Betaflight. That's a sort of the thing is that it used to be that if you had your P term tuned to the point where during flips and rolls it oscillated like this, it was probably overtuned the rest of the time, and you would want to back it down so it was a little calmer. But especially with the higher loop times and the other changes that have been made in recent versions of Betaflight, uh, I think you can have a little bit of an extreme oscillation like this during flips and rolls, and you still have a well-controlled P term the rest of the time, so it's not really a problem. So I don't have a problem with what I'm seeing here. Now we've got a full throttle scenario over here. Let's see what happens as you raise the throttle to full. No bad tendencies whatsoever. No oscillations. It's just doing its thing. So the fact that I don't see any bad tendencies here at full throttle, and let's see what happens when you chop the throttle now. You're doing a flip and a roll, and here you're raising the throttle. So since the throttle was lowered, I know you were falling, and now you're raising the throttle to catch yourself. And as you raise the throttle, we get a little bit of activity here on the P term. The P term gets a little more active here, right? You can see these surges here, and there we go. Now we got a little bit of getting out of line here with these sharp jaggies here. But overall, it's very well behaved and nothing to complain about. So, personally, I would try raising the P term here a little bit and to see if I could sharpen up the copter's response a little bit. But if you like the way it flies now, if you don't have things like bounce after rolls, let's see if I can find a roll to examine and see if there's a bounce after the roll. Let's look at the gyro at the end of this roll, right? And if we watch that in real time to see what your stick does, your stick returns to center relatively sharply, right? And we can see that the gyro comes smoothly and nicely back to center without, it could be a little sharper. In other words, it would be better to see the gyro, boom, hit that line a little, instead of having this sort of tail here. But I think well, no, you're zeroed here for sure. So there's a little bit of sort of not quite hitting the mark cleanly, but sort of creeping towards the mark. But I bet that looks better than if you had an oscillation, right? Or an overshoot and a rebound. So I think you got a really good tune here on roll. You could certainly try to raise P a little bit. I also like that the D term is very proportional to the P term. I feel like We don't see any bad tendencies on D where the D term is getting really hyperactive, where it's pulling the gyro and the P term around. Here we're at a scenario where we're starting to get some activity here. The D term is sharpening up with these sharp peaks here, but nothing bad. So I feel like you're in a really good spot right now, and definitely whatever you do as you make changes, pay close attention to if things are getting better or worse, because you're in a good spot right now, and it's easy to tune 5 steps down the line and go like, geez, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse and not better, and then you've lost what you had, and that's unfortunate. Let's look at roll pitch. Yeah, pretty similar on pitch. Basically everything I already said. Here we're getting a little more active. P term is a little more active. That's good. I like that. I generally want to see the pitch P term more active, unless this is something like a Krieger or a Mitsuko, and it isn't. Something that's more symmetrical in the weight, I should usually see the pitch P term more active than the roll P term, because the pitch axis, the weight is more spread out, and therefore the copter is more inherently damped on that axis. Here's full throttle. Now notice here on full throttle, look how different this looks. It's not like radically different, but we do start to see this is starting to look like a P-term oscillation here. Do you see the regular spacing of these peaks? The spacing of these peaks is very consistent. So this is the frequency component of the frame, the physical characteristics of the frame manifesting as a consistent frequency in the P-term oscillation. Oh, sorry, mute my computer. And that's starting to be a P-term oscillation. So I probably would not raise. And by the way, notice that continues. See, even though here we've stopped, it stopped kind of looking like an oscillation, but it still feels like we've got that consistent spacing going on. So, and here's a flip. Let's check your gyro here at the end. Yeah, nothing to complain about there. I don't think you had quite as sharp of a stop here. The gyro kind of creeps in. Maybe raise the D term a little bit to sharpen that up. But yeah, I feel like pitch axis, and again, so here's where you caught yourself at the end of that drop, right? And we can see big swings now on the P term. Big swing, boom, boom, boom. That's prop wash oscillation, boom, 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 right? Okay, so definitely, I feel like this pitch axis it's like right, it's almost right where it's like a 95% where I would want it. I think there may be a tiny bit of tweaking you could do on the D term to just refine the performance maybe a little bit one direction or the other by raising or lowering the D term just a bit. I might try raising it. And if you don't like this prop wash oscillation you're seeing here, you might lower the P term a little bit, but personally, this is right where I like it to be. Where, during normal flight, it's kind of, we see it start to get active occasionally, but then at the extremes, it starts to get a little bit maybe overactive, but just a little bit. Let's take a look at yaw. So this is a tough one on yaw. First of all, we don't have a D term here. That's fine. D term is 0. D gain is 0. You don't need a lot of D gain on yaw, so don't worry about that. Yaw is tough because there's always more vibration on, almost always more vibration on yaw than on the other axes. And so if we look at a scenario like this looks fine. If I only looked at this slice, I'm looking at the height of the swing here, right? So from here to here, right? And I'm picturing that. And I would say from that, you could almost afford to raise your P gain, right? But then and right here, you're at full throttle. Nothing too bad. Everything looks good, right? We're seeing these spikes here, these sharp back forth spike, and I don't know what to make of that. There's another one here, and again, I just don't know what to make of that. Let's see if we see any more. Maybe they're isolated. Okay. No, that's fine. But if we keep looking, I know I saw it when I first flipped over. Now the spikes are starting to get taller. And now, so, and now see, this is pretty unpleasant here. This isn't good here because now you're actually doing a yaw move, and these spikes are pretty huge. So I would probably just leave this alone. I don't like this, but I feel like it's likely that you would need to sacrifice some other performance to get rid of this. And this is such a small and isolated thing that it's not worth it. Like you could change your gyro filtering, you could reduce your P gains, but then you're probably going to have to reduce your P gain on yaw to the point where turns get sloppy and and not as locked in. And see, the rest of the time the P term's hardly doing anything. So the fact that yaw gets kind of ugly just every once in a while is, I think it's something that I would just accept. So there you go. Yeah, I agree. Your tune looks really good. Look for bad tendencies, like if there's bad stops at the end of flips and rolls, and then there's some room for pilot preference, like how much of a tolerance you personally have for prop wash oscillation. If you have less tolerance for prop wash oscillation, you just don't like seeing it, then you could reduce your pitch P gain specifically, and you could leave your roll P gain where it is. But yeah, I think you're really close on your tune. I think your tune is probably pretty good. And if you really are basically at defaults, then again, kudos to Boris because the defaults are pretty solid. All right, that's it. Happy flying.